The plan wasn't to do the conclusion to chapter 47 here in Mega Bang Na, but I remember there was this kind of auditorium, kind of a place where it's kind of nice, and as well, now if you're really looking for restaurants, all these floors, they're just restaurants here. Like you can look around, maybe afterwards we can just go around and show you, but it's just restaurants. All the floors here, just restaurants, either a shop here where you can buy food or just restaurants, right? So this is really not famine, right? Really the opposite of what's happening here in Egypt, in the story. So the conclusion, therefore we are doing it here. Okay? We easily seen other places and we can change, right? It fits perfectly with the chapter and the conclusion to this chapter. So in this chapter, the people come down, the family's now in Egypt, they meet up with Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, okay, you guys go and live there in Goshen. Joseph is taking care of them. Then the story moved from their family to the bigger family, to put it like that, the human family, God's creation. Okay, in Egypt, the people coming, the people's money ran out. Then they first sold their livestock to Joseph, and explained in the teaching. That's brilliant from Joseph buying that, because the people themselves would not have been able to take care of it. All the animals would have died. After the famine, there wouldn't have been anything left to work, no animals left to work anymore. So it's a brilliant thing that Joseph did that. Very wise. And then after that, a year later, the money ran out again. The priests got their money from Pharaoh, so they had no problem for the job they did, but the locals, the other people, had a problem. So they said, okay, we are willing to sell our lands and ourselves to be servants into Pharaoh, because otherwise if they just sell the land, then where do they go to live? In a squatter camp, prison, debtors prison, Charles Dickens. Like he even ended up in one, or can they stay in the land, work for Pharaoh in the land, but the land doesn't belong to them anymore, or it belongs now to Pharaoh. That may end, and then ultimately as well, the last point in this discussions, that they will provide, Pharaoh will provide seed, understandably Joseph, Pharaoh through Joseph, God through Joseph providing seed, so that they can, after when it starts raining again, well actually it doesn't rain in Egypt, right? I mean, it does sometimes, like snow. I remember that one year there was snow on the pyramids in Egypt, and in Siberia, where I was living then, there was like no snow even, and the grass outside, that was in December, when it's supposed to be -40, it was +6, and the grass is still green. Weird. Okay, but get back to this. So it not for rain, but for the rain to fall there in the equator area, where the Nile River, and in Ethiopia in the mountains, where the Blue and the White Nile comes from, unite there in Khartoum, flow through Egypt. Okay, so when that happens again, and they can plant, they will have the animals. Pharaoh will provide the seed. They will have, because the animals is life, Joseph's taking care of that. Pharaoh will provide the seed. So ultimately, perfect plan, a perfect solution to this whole problem. Okay, and it shows as well how the money ran out in Canaan as well. So the family would have died up there. They wouldn't have had enough money to be, if Joseph wasn't there, and if Joseph just stayed back home, right, and the brothers didn't do this evil deed, then what would have happened? They would have had to go to Egypt to buy food. For first 2 years, okay, great, they had food, but then no money, and they would have died. All of them would have died. Now they're in the land where there is food. Joseph is second in command. Okay, so again, it shows a perfect plan of God. Jacob, in the previous chapter, I explained to you that Jacob could not understand. When he was going down to Egypt, he did not know this. He could not understand this, but we know it. We can understand of, again, this perfect plan of God. Right. And so then ultimately, yes, there now. Then the last part of the chapter has to do with Jacob saying, Joseph, swear to me that you will bury me back in Canaan with my forefathers where they are buried. Okay, so it was important in their understanding to be buried with their forefathers, even still today. I explained that during the teaching part, and in other lessons I told you as well, the fact that even our family, we have family graveyards, right, where my mother, not my mother, my grandmother and their parents buried together, my grandfather, grandmother, and their grandfathers, and all generations up there on the farm, all buried together. Okay, But yes, we understand it's different. I'm not going to look at that now. They will still get time so we can look at the concept of how they saw afterlife and how we understand it ultimately as Christ was through the Spirit opening it up to us through the Old Testament and ultimately when He lived and He died and rose again. But the thing I really kind of want to get in this conclusion part of it, what we can take from this, what's a very important thing is they lost everything. Yes, they did lose everything, but they had their lives and that still could live on the lands and they had 80% of the produce left. Right, that's not nothing. They came out pretty well through this very, very evil time. If it wasn't for Joseph, through Joseph, God giving the dream to Pharaoh, therefore getting Joseph in, the brothers selling Joseph into slavery, then Potiphar's wife, all evil, then the dreams. If not for that, after 2 years, these guys' money were out. Canaan money were out. Everyone would have died. It would have been mass starvation. This would have been the Gola there in southern Russia, Ukraine, right? Where millions of people, tens of millions of people died of hunger. And George Bernard Shaw, invited by Stalin to come and check us out, and was like, oh, well, look at these fat Russian kids running around. Okay, what nonsense, okay? Like the mass media these days as well. There's no genocide to see there. There's no genocide there. Yeah, right. There's no genocide in Germany as well with the Jews. And look at the Holocaust now, right? So yeah, but what's new? What's new? Okay, nothing is new. So there would have been mass starvation, people who died out. The story of Joseph and his family would have been over. So God used this, because God knew all of this. Okay, again, I'm not now going to speak. Couldn't God just give rain or something, right? I'm not speaking about that now. But anyhow, so ultimately they were left with a lot. With their lives, place to live, food to produce, all they had to do was give 20% back to Pharaoh. Now these days, for us as Christians, I mean, I've heard countless sermons on tithing. In Russia, in the Baptist church, it is part of every Sunday service. You get 3-4 sermons every Sunday. There's the main sermon, but then there are the brothers practicing. Well, I don't understand that concept with a live audience. You know, there's other places you can practice. But anyhow, that's their way, their culture. So the brothers preaching too, then the main sermon, and then the final sermon again on tithing. It's like every Sunday like that. I don't know, except if it's changed now the last couple of years, because I haven't been there for 5 years, I think, 4 years or whatever. Anyhow, there's always a sermon about tithing. Why? Because people are not tithing. When you ask Christians, okay, we need funds for this, it's like, no, why do I need to give funds for this? This is my money. I worked hard. I work with these hands. I have a job. I work 24 hours a day. Or no one that works 24. But when you ask people for money, then they work 24 hours a day, right? Okay, they're 8 or 10 hours a day working. I worked hard for this. This belongs to me. Why do I need to give? Why do I need to give this money to the church? Because this belongs to me, right? Like these people say, oh, why do I need to give 20% to Pharaoh? If not for Joseph, then they would have had absolutely nothing. Giving 20% of nothing, right? I mean, giving them 20% puts things into perspective. It's the same way, whatever you as a Christian, actually every human being on this planet owes, what every person walking around here owns, right? The fact that they can walk into a shop and go and buy food there. How can they do that? Because God gave them jobs, even if they're Buddhist and not believing God, if they're Muslims and not believing God, if they're atheists and don't believe any kind of God. God gave them this brain, God gave them this body. Okay, I've seen a boy up there, or maybe a young grown guy, but in a wheelchair, clearly invalid, right? Yes, he might not be able, but for the majority of us, we can work. So therefore, all of this, up here, the legs, everything I owe, it comes from God. So to then, oh man, I can give this to the church, right? Because I worked for this. Why do I need to pray before I eat? Why do I need to thank God for anything? Because I work for it. Nonsense. If not for God, you would have nothing. So to give 10% back, actually in the New Testament, not 10%, everything belongs to God. So you need to actually give everything back. and not give back. So I give 10% to God, and then God gives 100% back to me, kind of nonsense, right? Prosperity Gospel and other maybe churches preaching this utter nonsense. So I give you, then you give me more. That's nonsense. It belongs to God. So give. So stop with this nonsense and stop thinking that this belongs to you. It belongs to God. So with a thankful heart, start giving to God, right? And you will see that giving is such a beautiful thing. Remember, everything you owe belongs to God. So stop complaining when you need to give to the church. It's not your money, it's God's money. Your family, not your family, is God's family. Your mind, not your mind, is God's. Everything you have belongs to God. So start giving back to God what belongs to Him, and stop complaining